Nobody in that park thought twice about the woman in the white coat. She walked like she owned the grass. Like the permission to be there had been granted specifically to her, and everyone else was simply tolerated. Her heels clicked against the pavilion stone even though she'd switched to flats for the agility field. Even the flats looked expensive. Even the flats announced themselves. The Whistler Mountain Regional Dog Trials were held every August in Squamish, British Columbia, a town flanked by granite peaks and old-growth cedar, the kind of place where people came to feel small in the best possible way. The event drew handlers from all across the province, ranchers from the Okanagan, working dog breeders from the Fraser Valley, retired RCMP officers, who still kept shepherds out of habit and love. It was not a flashy event. It was not meant to be. The registration tables were folding plastic. The trophies were modest. The coffee was from a thermos. Leonora Ashworth arrived in a black Range Rover with her daughter's Belgian Malinois and a training consultant she'd flown in from Calgary. She did not carry her own equipment. The consultant did. She did not fill out her own paperwork. An assistant did. She stood at the edge of the field in oversized sunglasses and checked her phone while her dog ran warm-up laps, and she looked like someone who had arrived at the wrong event and not yet decided whether to leave. Her dog's name was Seal. Seal was fast, genuinely fast, and trained well enough to place if handled with patience. But Leonora was not patient. She was competitive in the way that people are competitive when they've never truly lost anything, not with grace, not with practice, not in a way that taught them something useful. She'd entered CL in 3 previous trials that summer, placed second twice. The first place ribbons had gone home with someone else both times, and she had not forgotten it. Across the field, a man sat on a wooden bench with his arms resting on his knees and his eyes half closed. He looked like he was sleeping. He wasn't. His name was Reed. He was 38 years old, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from laziness, but from training. The kind of stillness that meant he was reading everything around him, without appearing to read anything. He wore a plain gray t-shirt and worn Carhartt pants. There was a scar on his left forearm, thin and curved, from a wire entanglement in a place he didn't talk about. Beside him, pressed against his right leg, sat Ghost. Ghost was a German shepherd, 4 years old, 73 pounds, with a black saddle and tan legs and amber eyes that tracked movement the way a hawk tracks field mice. Not aggressively, just completely. Ghost had been formally designated as a military working dog with the Canadian Armed Forces, attached to a Joint Task Force 2 unit. He had deployed twice. He had found 3 people alive in rubble and 1 IED that would have taken out a vehicle and everyone in it. He had a service record that most humans would be proud of. Ghost did not know any of this. Ghost knew Reed. That was enough. Reed was on leave, 14 days, which his commanding officer had essentially ordered him to take after Reed had turned in a post-deployment debrief that was technically complete and emotionally empty. Go somewhere that doesn't look like a briefing room, his CO had said. Take the dog. Don't come back until you've eaten something that wasn't from a canteen. Reid had driven up from Edmonton. He'd found the dog trials listed on a community board outside a gas station in Kamloops and thought, why not? He and Ghost had been doing agility work informally for 2 years, not competitively, just as enrichment, a way to keep Ghost's mind moving between deployments. A training sergeant had once told Reed that the worst thing you could do to a working dog was bore it. They don't turn off, she'd said. They just start working the wrong problems. Reid had entered them in the open division, under Ghost's civilian registration. He hadn't mentioned Ghost's service history. It didn't seem relevant. They were there to run a course and drive home, and maybe find somewhere quiet to eat breakfast. He was not there to impress anyone. The first runs went smoothly. Ghost moved through the weave poles like water finding a path, his body low and efficient, ears forward, reading Reed's hand signals the way you read a language you were born into. They weren't the fastest team on the field. Reed ran with a measured pace, not sprinting, letting Ghost set the rhythm. But their accuracy was near perfect. No missed contacts, no refusals. Ghost hit every obstacle with the kind of precision that made the handlers watching from the sidelines go quiet for a moment. One of them, an older man named Doug who bred working-line shepherds out of Abbotsford, leaned over to his wife and said, "That dog's been trained by somebody who knows what they're doing." His wife watched Ghost clear the A-frame and land without breaking stride. "That's not trial training," she said. "That's something else." They weren't wrong. Between runs, Reed sat back on the bench and gave Ghost water from a collapsible bowl, and a piece of dried venison that Ghost accepted with ceremony. Not greedily, but deliberately, like he understood it was a reward and wanted to receive it properly. Reed scratched behind Ghost's ears and said nothing. Ghost leaned into the scratch and closed his eyes briefly. A woman passing by smiled at them. "Beautiful dog," she said. "Thank you," Reed said. "What's his name?" "Ghost." She nodded like that made sense and kept walking. Leonora's first run was fast and messy. Seal knocked 2 bars and missed a contact on the dog walk. Leonora's face did something complicated at the edge of the field. Not quite a grimace, not quite composed. She spoke in a low, sharp voice to the Calgary consultant, who nodded twice and said nothing useful. Her second run was better. Seal ran cleaner. They placed 3rd in their division. 3rd was not what Leonora had come for. She watched Reed and Ghost from across the field during the 3rd heat. She watched Ghost move through the tire jump and the tunnel and the teeter with that infuriating precision. And she watched the small cluster of handlers who had drifted closer to the ring to see them run. And something behind her sunglasses went cold. After the scores were posted, Ghost and Reed placed 1st in the open division. Clean run, best time of the morning. Leonora placed 2nd again. The award presentation was informal, a small table, a volunteer with a clipboard reading out names, handshakes and modest applause. Reed accepted the ribbon without ceremony. He folded it once and put it in his jacket pocket. Ghost sat at his left heel and did not move. It was during the break afterward, near the water station at the edge of the pavilion, that it happened. Leonora walked past with Seal on leash. She was speaking to her consultant and not watching where she was going. Seal veered toward Ghost, not aggressively, just curiously, the way dogs do. Ghost held his position. He did not bark. He did not lunge. He turned his head slightly and waited. "Control your animal," Leonora said, not to her own dog. To Reed. Reed looked at her. "Ghost is sitting still." He was staring at Seal. "He's a dog." She pulled Seal back sharply, and Seal yelped. And then Leonora looked at Ghost as though the yelp were his fault. Something shifted in her expression. It was the look of someone who has decided that a situation is someone else's problem, and they would like it resolved immediately. "These open classes shouldn't allow military surplus animals," she said. It was not said quietly. "It's not a fair competition." Reed said nothing. He looked at her the way he looked at a lot of things, steadily, without heat, cataloging. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you," Reed said. She waited for more. He didn't give it. That seemed to make it worse. Reed watched her go. Ghost watched her too for a moment, then looked back up at Reed. "Leave it," Reed said softly. It was a command. Ghost looked forward. The afternoon session was the Junior Open, a mixed heat that included handlers who had placed in morning divisions and could run a second time for points toward an end-of-season ranking. Reed hadn't entered the afternoon round. He was planning to pack up, find somewhere to eat, maybe drive out to the Squamish Chief and sit on a rock for an hour. He was walking Ghost along the perimeter path when he heard it. A sharp crack, not a collision, not a dropped piece of equipment. He knew what it was before he turned around. Leonora was standing at the edge of the practice ring with a training rod, a thin fiberglass stick, the kind used to gesture toward obstacles, raised above her head. Seal had missed a jump on a practice run. The rod had come down across Seal's side, not hard enough to do serious damage, hard enough to make the sound that Reed had heard from 40 feet away. Seal cried out and pressed herself low to the ground. Ghost went rigid beside Reed's leg. Reed turned. He walked. Not fast, not slow. He covered the 40 feet with the particular quality of movement that people who'd trained with him had learned to recognize. Unhurried but irreversible, like weather coming in. He stopped 8 feet from Leonora. "Put it down," he said. She turned. She looked at him with genuine surprise, then irritation. "I beg your pardon? The rod. Put it down. This is my dog. This is a training tool. You have no. You struck the dog in frustration. That's not training. Put it down." The consultant took a step back. He had the look of someone calculating the fastest exit. The volunteer at the adjacent table had gone very still. Leonora stared at Reed. She was not accustomed to being spoken to this way. She was not accustomed to someone standing 8 feet from her, with that quality of complete calm that somehow, counterintuitively, made her feel like she was the one in danger. "Who do you think you are?" she said. Reed looked at her for one more second. Then he crouched down and spoke to Seal. "Easy," he said. "Easy, girl." Seal's tail moved once, uncertainly. Ghost, still on Reed's left, was motionless. He was watching Leonora's hands. "Do not touch my dog," Leonora said. Reed stood. "Your dog is frightened. If you pick that rod up again and use it the way you just used it, I'll call the BCSPCA and I will stand here until they arrive." He said it the way he said most things, without volume, without performance. Like a statement of weather, like a thing that was simply going to be true. There was a silence. Leonora's face went through several things. She was not a person who backed down. She was not used to the experience of being outweighted by someone who was not raising their voice, or invoking money, or social position, who was simply, quietly, immovable. She put the rod down. She picked up Seal's leash. She walked toward the pavilion without looking back. The volunteer at the table exhaled. The consultant looked at Reed and said nothing. Reed looked back at him until he also walked away. There is a particular kind of person who does not feel the consequences of their behavior in the moment. They feel it later, in the middle of the night, or not at all, depending on the person. Leonora was driving back to the pavilion parking lot when her phone rang. It was her assistant, informing her that the trial organizers had received a formal complaint, that a witness statement had been filed, that there would be a review. She pulled over on the gravel shoulder of the access road. She sat in the car for a long moment. She was not thinking about CL. She was thinking about the look on Reed's face, about the fact that he had not been angry, about the fact that she was not sure what he had been, and that this uncertainty was, for reasons she could not name, worse than anger would have been. Reed was packing the last of his gear into the back of his truck when Doug from Abbotsford walked over. "That woman," Doug said. "That was you at the practice ring?"
"Yeah, good."
Doug was quiet for a moment. He looked at Ghost, who was already loaded in the crate in the truck bed, nose pressed to the mesh. "What unit?" he asked. Reed glanced at him. "My son was with the PPCLI for 6 years, Doug said. I know how someone stands." Reed considered. "JTF2, he said. Doug nodded slowly. "Ghost deployed twice," Reed said. "It felt like something dice," Reed said. "I figured," Doug said. He looked at the truck, at Ghost behind the mesh. "Dogs like that, they see things. They remember." He paused. "My son's dog came home different too. Took about 8 months before he'd sleep without one ear up." Reed said nothing. He looked at the mountains. "You both done good today," Doug said. He walked back toward the pavilion. Reed watched him go, then turned back to the truck. Ghost was watching him through the mesh with those amber eyes. "Yeah," Reed said quietly. "Good." 3 weeks passed. The formal complaint against Leonora had been submitted to the BC Dog Sports Association and the BCSPCA. The trial organizers had reviewed witness accounts. Leonora had retained a lawyer, initially, and then quietly dismissed him. When it became clear that the complaint was well documented and corroborated by 4 independent witnesses and footage from a handler's camera that had been recording a practice run nearby, she received a 2-year suspension from sanctioned trials in British Columbia. CL was assessed by a veterinary behaviorist in Vancouver. The assessment noted signs consistent with correction-based aversion training and recommended a 6-month program with a certified positive reinforcement trainer. Leonora paid for the program without being asked twice. Whether this was remorse or liability management was not entirely clear, even to Leonora herself. Narrator's note: in the months that followed, the footage from that practice ring, 11 seconds, taken accidentally, circulated among working dog communities in Canada and then beyond. It did not go viral in the dramatic sense. It spread the way things spread among people who care about specific things. Quietly, passed hand to hand, watched more than once. Most people who saw it did not comment. They just watched a man walk 40 feet without hurrying, crouch down to a frightened dog, and stand back up. In October, Reed received a package at the base address he'd listed on his trial registration, a small parcel from Squamish. No return name. Inside was a photograph taken by Doug's wife, Reed and Ghost on the agility field, mid-run. Ghost clearing the broad jump in the particular way he had, all 4 feet off the ground, ears back, absolutely in motion. On the back, in handwriting Reed didn't recognize, "Thank you for stopping. Some of us were afraid too." Reed put it on the shelf above his desk. That was where he kept the things that mattered: a folded Canadian flag, a coin from a unit that no longer existed, his mother's watch. The photograph went between the flag and the coin. Ghost jumped up to look at the shelf, as he sometimes did, then settled on the floor below it. Reed sat down in the chair at his desk and looked at the photograph for a while. Then he got up, refilled Ghost's water bowl, and started making dinner. The Whistler Mountain Regional Dog Trials were held again the following August. Reed didn't enter. He and Ghost were deployed. But Doug was there, with his shepherd from Abbotsford, and he mentioned to a few people that he'd heard from a friend of a friend that the man who'd stopped that woman at the practice ring had been back in country since spring, and that the dog was doing fine, and that they were both, as far as anyone could tell, doing exactly what they were built to do. Someone asked if he knew the man's name. "Reed," Doug said. "And the dog?" Doug smiled. "Ghost." The name suited him, the person thought. A dog that was there, but not quite visible. A dog that you felt before you saw. The kind of quiet that watches everything.